Trade union activist and member of the national executive of the UK's biggest union, UNISON from Scotland, Stephen Smellie. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be with you, Erem. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start with the Kurdish leader's Abdullah Ocalan situation. He has been held in isolation in prison for 23 years now. He has been denied visits from his family and lawyers. There are now concerns about Öcalan's health and whereabouts. Can you comment on this treatment first of all?
I think the treatment for Ocalan or anyone else in that situation is appalling. Um, People should be able to access their families, should be able to access their lawyers, they should be able to access the outside world when they're in prison, whatever they're in prison for. So there's human rights issues there that are clearly being breached and have been breached for some time there, and Ocalan deserves better. All political prisoners deserve better than that.
What is the importance of freedom of Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan and delisting the PKK from forbidden organizations list?
Well, I think that's right. I think the Turkish government's strategy towards the Kurds generally, Kurdish culture, Kurdish language, Kurdish cultural and political expression is one of isolation. It's about saying you don't exist. It's about saying you don't have a voice, you don't have a political expression. So there's a consistent approach, if you like, to the isolation of Ocalan, the individual, and how they approach the whole issue. Um, Ocalan and PKK are central to uh, peace and democracy in the region, and without Ocalan being able to access his lawyers, his supporters, and being free to engage in discussions and bring forward his ideas. And without the PKK being able to operate in the peace negotiations, then there will be no peace. It's as simple as that. So Ocalan, freeing Ocalan and delisting the PKK are part of a peace process. That's what it's fundamentally about. This, and if we want to achieve peace, then we need to take those steps. Ocalan needs to be freed, and the PKK need to be delisted so they can engage in the discussion about the pathway, the road to democracy and freedom.
Thank you. What was the target by taking Mr. Öcalan as a hostage with the February 15 international conspiracy?
I think Turkey's intention was to behead a movement. I think they thought if we capture, imprison, and of course at that time the death sentence was under consideration. If they were able to remove Ocalan, then they would have decapitated the movement. I think they clearly underestimated the Kurdish movement. Kurdish movement has never been about one individual, no matter how important that individual is and how inspirational that individual is. But through Ocalan's teachings over many years, many Kurdish leaders have been developed. They also were part of a global uh, coming together of the global interests of European and American and essentially capitalist or nations who saw Turkey essential to their stance in relation to the power balance within the Middle East, and therefore colluding with Turkey to decapitate the Kurdish movement suited the global powers agenda at that time, and therefore there was that conspiracy to keep Turkey on side and support their efforts to keep control of their own state. So Ocalan and the Kurdish movement were unfortunate that those interests of Turkey and the European powers coincided. It has failed. I mean, Ocalan's still in prison. PKK is a banned organisation, but the Kurdish movement is still there. It is still strong, and they are still making progress. They have not gone away. They did not succeed in killing off a movement which was about men and women arguing for, organising for peace and democracy and freedom. But that struggle continues today.
So this conspiracy has also driven the Kurdish issue to an insoluble state. How do you evaluate the isolation on Mr. Öcalan? How would you comment on the approach of the EU and ECHR as well in that case?
I think ultimately they're losing. If as I said, if the idea was to isolate Ocalan to decapitate the Kurdish movement, then it's failed because the Kurdish movement has grown. Its support within Europe, within European countries and across the world has grown. Ocalan has become a symbol for the struggle, not just in Kurdistan, Turkey, but a symbol for struggle for democracy, for peace, for justice across the world. Movements are building around the ideas that Ocalan and the Kurdish people have been putting forward. The stance of the EU and other countries like that is appalling, but they undermine their own supposed values of democracy and freedoms and peace by colluding, continuing to collude with Turkey to suppress Kurdish voices and Ocalan's voice in particular.
Thank you. The Turkey is getting more and more repressive in its treatment of the Kurds. This must have a bearing on how Western allies view the Kurds, actually. So, what can we do to shame our governments into acting in a favor of the values of human rights that they're talking about and justice that they claim to uphold?
We will continue to publicise what is going on in Turkey and in the region at Turkey's behest. It's not just Kurdish people who are oppressed. In civil society in Turkey, trade unionists, human rights campaigners, women, they are all subject to oppression by the state. They're all subject to violence at the behest of the state. We will continue to offer solidarity to those peoples through our trade union movements, through our political organisations, through our civil organisations in this country and Europe. And by doing so, we will continue to expose to our populations what Turkey is about. And therefore, through that, we are able to challenge and question our governments about their relationship with Turkey. We need to do more of that. Clearly, in the UK, our government is so friendly with the Turkish government at this point in time that they do not take seriously. They do not argue for human rights. They do not argue for democracy. They do not challenge actions of Turkey, which are clearly undemocratic, are clearly breaches of human rights, and that undermines their own base. So we offer solidarity to the people, the Kurdish people in Turkey and throughout the region, and we offer solidarity to those other groups who are oppressed by the same Turkish state.
Dear Stephen, lastly, let's take your message as well. What is your expectation and message for Mr. Öcalan and the Kurdish people?
I hope Mr. Ocalan is able to receive messages of support. I hope Mr. Ocalan is free before long to be able to sit down and discuss and debate how we take these issues forward. But I would urge Mr. Ocalan, if the message can ever get through to Mr. Ocalan, to stay strong. I understand there are concerns about his health, and that's very concerning. But I know from reading his works, reading his ideas, that his intellect remains strong. And that is an inspiration for us all. I would say to the Kurdish people struggling, whether they are struggling through the political processes in Turkey or through their own organisations with the trade unions or civil organisations or human rights organisations or in the mountains, I would urge them to stay true to their values, to their ideals, because those ideals are the future for us all.
Dear Stephen Smellie, trade union activist and member of the National Executive of the UK's biggest union, UNISON, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you very much, Erem.
Thank you.
Cheers.